Well, if you've ever wanted to start your own business, and lots of people do, our next guest may inspire you. She went from having a kiosk at a farmer's market to a multi-million-dollar business that now stretches around the globe.
Soft, warm, hand-rolled pretzels fresh out of the oven. If you've been to a shopping mall in America, you've probably savored an Auntie Anne's pretzel. What started as a hobby for Anne Beiler turned into something more. A profitable worldwide business with over 900 locations. But Anne's recipe for success did have a few bumps and twists of faith along the way.
Anne Beiler is the founder of Auntie Anne's Pretzels, and she's the author of a brand new book called Twist of Faith. And we welcome you back to the 700 Club. It's great to see you again.
Thank you, Terry. It's great to be here today.
Why did you get into the pretzel business? Was that a life call? Or
No, it wasn't. I never dreamed when I was a kid that I was going to be the pretzel queen someday. You know, it's not exactly what you dream about. But I went into the pretzel business because our marriage had been on the rocks and nearly divorced, and my husband loved me back into my family, and just an amazing story of God's love and grace and forgiveness. But because of that, he got into counseling, and he became so passionate about that. He was doing it as a free service in the church, in our home, wherever he could, 3 days a week, and wasn't really bringing home the bacon. And so I went to work simply to support his vision of counseling.
so that he could do what it was he loved.
That's
Where
right.
did the recipe come from?
Well, the recipe was another God thing. It was a mistake on our part, and I can't really go into the details of that, but it was a mistake. And we fiddled with the recipe for a number of weeks after I bought my own store, and finally I was going to give up on it one day, and Jonas was there, and he said, well, before you give up, let me try something. I have an idea. So he is really the mastermind behind the Auntie Anne's.
And did you ever think when you first started this that it would be, did you ever have vision for what it is today? I mean, around the world, people are eating Auntie Anne's pretzels.
I know. Isn't it amazing? No, I never had any aspirations. I was very happy with one little store in Downingtown, Pennsylvania, and I was just, it was wonderful. But little did I know that God had other plans to take us all the way around the world. In less than 6-7 years, we were in Jakarta, Indonesia. Amazing.
Well, your book is called Twist of Faith, and you have had lots of twists along the way. You know, I've heard many people say, and I think it's very true, that the victories and the successes that we have are wonderful, but they don't really change who we are. You've been changed many times throughout your life by difficulties. Share some of those with us.
Well, I think some of the most difficult things in my life, I'm so happy, Terry, that today I can actually talk about it.
Yes.
You know, the death of our daughter when she was 19 months old, and then going into see my pastor, who was I thought a very kind, loving, and a trusting man, and went to see him for some help. And before I left his office, he seduced me, and being in a sexually abusive relationship for 6 years, and the trauma of all of that took me then about 20 years. Which is sad for me.
Not only your walk, but your husband's life, the family, the community, not because of you, but because of this. This was a much bigger thing than just your relationship in that scenario. To hang on to your faith, to trust that things could change and get better. How did God move in your life in that?
There was pieces, moments, times, defining moments throughout those years that it's just like God would tell me that it'll be okay. It's going to be all right. And you know, but the thing that really helped me, Terry, more than anything, I prayed. I went to church every Sunday. I read my Bible. I cried out to God for deliverance. And you know, the thing that changed my life was confession. James 5:16 says, "If you confess your faults one to another." I was confessing all this to God. Yeah, it wasn't. It just wasn't
freedom
doing
that
it.
comes
It was amazing.
too, when that all comes out. You said just before we came on the air, now I can talk about everything.
Yes.
When you bring something into the light, it doesn't have a hold on you anymore, does it?
That's exactly right. Confession, and it just began. That was just the spark that really set me on the path toward healing. And so I want to just encourage people, confess your faults one to another. Find somebody that you can trust and start there. tell someone your deepest, darkest secrets.
And when we do what he tells us to do, God's faithful and just.
And be patient with the process.
You have a saying, life is hard, but God is good, and don't confuse the two. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think, Terry, I grew up in an Amish home, and there's 8 of us kids, and 1 mom and 1 dad, and I mean, what a concept, right? But it was good. And so it was very simple, very secure. My parents loved God, taught us about God. So as a child, which I think every child should have this opportunity to feel like life is good.
Yes.
You know. Yes. And so that was my really secure environment that I came out of. But as I experienced tragedy and trauma in my life, I realized that life is hard. But as a child, life being good was a wonderful thing. But I also, in that mix somehow, I felt like God was harsh. God was hard. That as long as I pleased him, as long as I did what he said in his word, as long as I was completely obedient, that he would bless me. And so I was a little confused. You know, life was good, God was harsh. But through my experiences in life now, I understand, and I'm so at peace with this, that life is hard, but God is good. And not to confuse the two. And it's really when I understand that piece of theology that I was able to accept the fact that life wasn't like I thought it should have been, but life is as it was. And that's how I wrote my book. Not as it should have been, but I wrote the book as it was.
How did you keep from becoming bitter? When you lost Angie, when you came through the relationship scenario?
I was bitter for some time, and bitterness leads to anger, or maybe it's the other way around, I'm not sure. But I didn't realize I was bitter, that I was angry, until in 1996, 97, I went to Dr. Richard Dobbins at Emerge Ministries in Ohio. He sat me down in his office, and he started to explain to me that what happened to me back in 1976 was really not my fault with Pastor. It's what they call abuse of spiritual power. And so he helped me unravel my bad thinking. It was really just really not correct for me to think that it was all my. So I took this shame and blame, and all these years everything was always my fault. And so I stayed in that mode. But anger and bitterness will take you there. Then you become critical, and you become, disillusioned.
It affects everything.
It just affects
every
everything.
relationship.
Yes.
You know, one of the things that struck me as I read your book was how many times your marriage to Jonas could have fallen to the wayside.
Oh, you're
and
so
yet,
right.
God sustained that. Through both of you, really. I mean, it wasn't just one or just the other, but he had an amazing capacity to forgive and to press on into the next day. I mean,
He's an amazing man. I think every woman should have a husband that loves them as Christ loves them. And Jonas decided back in 1982, on his knees before God, he said, I want to love Anne. I want to be able to make our family work. And God said, love her as I love you.
Wow. Oh, for more people that would make that choice. Well, It's an interesting, fascinating book. This woman whose pretzels you've enjoyed around the world. It's called Twist of Faith. And it's the story of Anne Beiler, who is the founder of Auntie Anne's Pretzels. Thank you for sharing with us. And
it's my pleasure.
And thank you for your pretzels. They're good. God bless you, Anne. Thank you for your honesty. Pat?
We'll all be eating Auntie Anne's pretzels. She's a great lady. Well, coming up.